General Trollinger, there have been multiple reports over the last months since the February 2020 agreement that the Taliban have not broken their ties with al-Qaeda, that al-Qaeda continues to operate with the Taliban in Afghanistan, and that ISIS also is operating in Afghanistan. Is that your understanding, and is that the understanding of our military people on the ground in Afghanistan?
Senator, it's clear that the Taliban's compliance with the agreement has been uneven, but I would prefer to go into detail on that in our closed session.
I appreciate that. However, people are going to know very soon, once we pull out, whether al-Qaeda and ISIS continue to operate in Afghanistan. Mr. Helvey, I appreciated your support for those Afghans who have helped us during our 20 years in Afghanistan. But I think we've got to be clearer about what we're doing to address that. Currently, there are an estimated 18,000 Afghan SIV applicants currently in process. These applicants and their families, as we know, are in imminent danger from the Taliban. Many of the delays in the SIV program stem from the difficulty that those applicants have in obtaining employment verification letters from former and often defunct employers. And considering that many of those applicants have served in support of the military and directly with the Department of Defense, do we have a centralized database that can be used to verify the employment of those SIV applicants?
Senator, it is my understanding that we are drawing from a centralized database to collect and provide biometric data to facilitate that type of identification. I don't have the specific, the scope for how long that biometric data has been collected, so I think there are some gaps in that. But since we began the collection and maintenance of that biometric data, we've been able to use that. There are Afghan individuals that have supported us prior to the collection of that biometric data that we are looking to pull other resources of data to provide that type of information to State Department.
Can you share with me and with this committee specifically what we're doing with that data?
Senator, if I can provide that in writing, just to provide the specifics,
that would be great.
I
appreciate that.
To do that.
In fiscal year 2014, NDAA required that the Secretary of Defense designate a senior coordinating official, and I'm quoting, with sufficient expertise, authority, and resources to carry out the duties with regard to the issuance of SIVs. It tasked the official with developing proposals to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the process. Can you tell me if we have someone designated to do that, who that person is? And if not, are we going to appoint someone to do that?
I will have to get back to you, Senator. I think that, State Department's in the lead for this program. And so let me find out, who if there is such a special coordinator performing that function.
I can tell you that I don't believe that there is, so I would urge the department to take a look at that. Finally, let me just ask you, in the time that I have left, about the status of women and girls in Afghanistan. We know that on May 8th, there was a bus bombing that killed more than 80 people. Many of them were schoolgirls. We have seen the violence against women, particularly women in the media and women working in Afghanistan over the last months, and based on what we understand from the Taliban, we expect that to continue once the United States pulls out. So can you speak to any steps that we are taking to try and support the women and girls of Afghanistan, and particularly in the context of the Women, Peace and Security Act in 2017, which requires the department to incorporate gender lens decision-making into its policies and actions? Are we doing anything to involve women as we're looking at what happens after we leave?
Senator, with respect to what we're doing today, we are using some of the funding within the Afghan Security Forces Fund, or ASIF, to encourage and build in Afghan women in particular into the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces. And so that is something that we are doing. With respect to...
We've been doing that for some time, though. Is that not correct?
Yes, Senator, that is something that we have been doing in compliance with the law. In terms of where we need to go, I agree with you 100%. We want to be able to maintain and see the gains that we've made over the past 20 years preserved. This is something that we're working with our State Department, USAID colleagues, and our coalition partners who are equally interested in this. I think, fundamentally, this is going to have to be something that the Afghan government and the Taliban, if they're able to sit and determine the arrangements for the future of Afghanistan, to figure out how to get to that peaceful outcome and to be able to preserve these gains for all Afghans. And I think with respect to what the Taliban does in the future, this is something that Ambassador Khalilzad has talked about. At some point, if they are in a position where they are exercising power or influence in Afghanistan, they're going to need to have international support. And that does provide a degree of leverage that the international community would have on the Taliban in how it treats the people within the borders.
Well, I appreciate that answer, but we'd have had a lot more leverage if we had made the point to the Taliban when we were negotiating a peace agreement before we signed it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Now let me recognize via WebEx Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, first of all, let me thank you both for being here before us today. We most certainly appreciate your
Senator, we can't hear you.
How about now?
We can hear you on WebEx, but maybe not in the committee room.
We still cannot hear you.
So,
Yeah.
Mike, we can hear you on WebEx, so staff just has to turn up your volume in the committee room.
Yeah, I think they need to. You got it now?
We can hear you now.
All right, great. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Senator Gillibrand. Appreciate that. Gentlemen, first of all, let me just begin by saying thank you very much for your time in front of the committee today. I don't think this is necessarily the type of a meeting that you relish to come before the United States Senate. I want to begin by acknowledging that there is no perfect answer to what should be done next in Afghanistan. We've been in a protracted state of war for almost 20 years. At least 2,448 service members and DoD civilians have died. An additional 20,722 service members and DoD civilians have been wounded in action, according to the current DoD website. The human cost has also been borne by our NATO allies, the Afghan National Security Forces, and the Afghan people. Finally, we can never forget the 2,997 people who were killed on 9/11. My question is this: is there a middle ground where we continue, or where we could continue, to support the government of Afghanistan that would recognize the lives sacrificed and the hundreds of billions of dollars our citizens have invested in this endeavor? One that provides the resources to Afghanistan to prevent a return to being a haven for terrorists or the creation of a power vacuum which would benefit China, Russia, and Iran, while the Afghan government develops the unique capabilities that only we currently can provide. Gentlemen?
Senator, thank you for that question. And if I may, that is the path that we are seeking to embark upon. While we are retrograding the forces out of Afghanistan, we want to make sure, and the president has been clear, he wants to continue providing support and assistance to our Afghan partners. So to the extent that we can, we're looking at ways to be able to continue providing the critical support to the ANDSF in terms of continued paying their salaries, continued providing assistance for contracted logistics and maintenance, and providing support for the Afghan Air Forces and the Special Mission Wing, which are...
Mr. Helvey, I hate to let me just ask this. Are you talking about providing that until we are out of the country, or are you talking about providing that over an extended period of time?
We're talking about providing that after we leave, in addition. The challenge that we face today is making sure that we've got the right type of oversight mechanisms that we're working, but the intent would be that we would maintain that support, provided we also continue to get the support from Congress. The intent would be we would maintain those resources and that assistance to the Afghan government.
Well,
Even
thank you. I appreciate. I think you're answering my question on it. I do want to ask General Trollinger, rather than asking you the same question or expecting you to respond, I think because this will be a policy decision that the administration will be making, I want to go to you and I want to ask you this. With the U.S. withdrawing U.S. forces from Afghanistan by September, one has to question the ability of the Afghan security forces to stand their ground against the Taliban and our ability to successfully conduct over-the-horizon counterterrorism operations. I know we've kind of touched on that a little bit, but I want to ask it this way. In your professional military judgment, can we successfully and continually combat threats posed by the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and other violent extremist organizations via over-the-horizon operations?
I absolutely believe we can, Senator. We have the capabilities to be able to posture in the region where it's required. We have the capabilities to be able to monitor potential adversaries, track those adversaries, and then strike when conditions permit and allow.
Do we have the will to do that? Is that the plan right now?
The plan right now would be to make a seamless transition from what we have currently in Afghanistan to other locations that would be able to meet our overarching objectives of ensuring that Afghanistan doesn't become a safe haven for terrorists that would attack the U.S. or our allies.
Gentlemen, thank you for your answers. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Senator Round. Now let me recognize via WebEx Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to continue the questioning that Senator Shaheen started. General Trollinger, with the U.S. and NATO's departure, human rights groups, non-governmental organizations, schools, and business are left trying to figure out contingency plans for female employees, for female students, should the Taliban return to power by force or through an agreement with the Afghan government. Considering the Taliban is already restricting the human rights of women in the territories they control, what is the U.S. doing to ensure peace negotiations result in a deal that protects women throughout the country, particularly after the withdrawal?
Senator, we continue to support the ANDSF and intend to do so going forward, even as we retrograde from Afghanistan. We also continue to work with our coalition allies and partners to facilitate diplomatic pressure that can be put on against the Taliban to work out a peaceful agreement, negotiations with Jeroa, such that women's rights, girls' rights, et cetera, are protected.
Mr. Helvey, over the last 2 decades, the United States has spent more than $780 million to promote women's rights and gender equality in Afghanistan, and the efforts have yielded mixed results. What kinds and amounts of funding should we expect in the future? How will funding be implemented given the security situation after troop withdrawals? And second, Afghan women have pointed to the vocal support by the United States and other international actors as key factors to advancing rights and participation in the public sphere. What will the U.S. do to continue to advance women's rights and gender equality?
Senator, thank you for that question, and you're right to point out we have spent resources to promote the rights of women and girls and other minorities in Afghanistan as part of our policy and approach there. I don't want to get ahead of the president's budget in terms of what types of future funding would be requested or required. But with respect to in response to this previous question to Senator Shaheen, ASIF does have specific requirements for promoting women in the Afghan Defense and Security Forces, and our intent would be that would continue. We'd also continue working with our state and USAID and coalition partners in providing the type of diplomatic support and pressure on the Taliban, because I think fundamentally the best way to protect the rights of women, girls, and minorities in Afghanistan is to realize a negotiated peaceful settlement and outcome to the war that's been in Afghanistan for the better part of 40 years.
I have some counterterrorism questions and assessments of Taliban strengths that I will ask in closed session. But let me just ask one more question of General Trollinger before my time expires. What's your assessment of the security of the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, and what is your assessment of how the security situation in Afghanistan after the withdrawal of troops will affect the ability to conduct diplomatic and other operations?
I think our diplomatic facilities in Kabul remain secure, and planning is ongoing currently to ensure that that remains the case as we continue to conduct our retrograde. And then any diplomatic security presence that remains, we will want to ensure has the appropriate security force to protect our diplomats and their important mission.
And then can you please, I know you requested to answer Senator Shaheen's question in closed session, but can you give us your general assessment of the likelihood of Afghanistan falling under Taliban control? And if it does not fall completely, the likelihood of central government only having control of Kabul, and what effect that will have on the Afghan people and our ability to fight terrorism? And perhaps maybe whether a peace or power sharing agreement between the Taliban and the Afghan government could prevent a Taliban takeover.
I will acknowledge the range of potential outcomes in the months as we go forward, everything from a Taliban takeover to ANDSF being successful in defending against the Taliban, and Jeroa maintaining its ability to effectively govern, and everything in between. But I will say that the ANDSF is they're a capable force. They have capable ground, air, and special operations forces, and here very recently they've effectively both defended against Taliban attacks as well as gone on the offensive to disrupt Taliban activities.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Now let me recognize Senator Ernst, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, very much for being here today. 20 years ago, of course, our nation's service members deployed to deliver justice to the terrorists who had carried out the deadly and deliberate attacks on our homeland, and thousands of Iowans have proudly served in Afghanistan, risking life and limb. And I am hoping that I can assure the Iowa families and the American people that the threat to our homeland has been reduced, and we have the measures in place to keep this threat at bay. So I know we have talked about our ability to project over the horizon. I understand that. But Mr. Helvey, what is your assessment of our adversaries' ability to plan for and conduct attacks on America from bases in Afghanistan after we have gone? So let's talk about the reverse. What is their ability to plan? Not our ability to respond. What is their ability to plan attacks on us when we have left?
Their ability today has been significantly degraded. And that degradation is due in large part to the presence that we've had in that country. With respect to the specifics, I'd prefer to keep those specifics in the closed session. But I can say with confidence that the ability of international terrorist groups to plan, recruit, train, organize, and execute attacks against the United States from Afghanistan has been significantly reduced.
Significantly reduced because we are there and we're enabling efforts on the part of the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces, correct?
Our presence has had a significant impact on that. I would also add, though, that the nature of the international terrorist threat over the past 20 years has become much more diffuse. So, yeah, as we know, we've got international terrorist groups operating in the Middle East and Africa, northern part of Africa. It's not the nature of the threat has changed over the past 20 years, but the threat emanating from Afghanistan to the United States and our allies has been significantly degraded.
And please don't mistake me. I do believe that at some point we have to bring this war to an end. Absolutely, we have to do that. However, not leaving a remnant or a small number of troops within Afghanistan, intelligence officials in Afghanistan, we are leaving a void. And I do worry that while the threat has been diminished, that it will reconstitute in Afghanistan. So just worries there, and I hope that everything goes smoothly and that the impacts to stability are minimal. I do also share the concerns raised by Senator Shaheen and by Senator Gillibrand. And Senator Gillibrand and I went to Afghanistan pre-pandemic, and we were able to visit a number of training facilities where Afghan women were being trained in various secretary and clerical positions, but also as women warriors. And I am very concerned about what will happen to them, what will happen to girls that have attended school and are now working in businesses. So I just want to reemphasize that. Senator Shaheen is leading a letter. I am a co-lead to our president asking for those special immigrant visas. It is something that we are very concerned about. Just in the news this morning coming from Iowa, we have an Afghan interpreter in Iowa Falls, and his asylum request has been denied. He just received the letter the other day. So if you can also work with the State Department and just stress to them, as we are stressing to them, how important it is that as we're withdrawing, we are also making sure that we are protecting those who have enabled our forces in Afghanistan. It is extremely important. And it's not just the men that have served as interpreters, but it will also be the women and girls that have stepped up to assist us as well. So I am running out of time. I know this is a very important hearing. You can hear the level of frustration in all of our voices as we're going through this. I do believe that, again, that we need to withdraw our forces. I think that is important, but we need to do it in a smart and meaningful way. And I sincerely hope that this is the right plan, because if not, we will see a significant threat increase to our homeland, to our allies, but most certainly to the people that we are leaving behind. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You want to bring up a discussion on the matter of utmost importance in Illinois, that is the safe return of my constituent, Mark Frericks. Mr. Frericks is an Illinoisan and a Navy veteran. He lived in Kabul for years, working as a civilian contractor before he was kidnapped on January 31st in 2020. And with our military relying more and more on contractors, these Americans who are there as contractors are there on behalf of us, but lack the protections that our troops have when they are in places like Afghanistan. The information that we have right now indicates that the Taliban or its affiliates, likely the Haqqani network, are holding Mr. Frericks in Afghanistan or Pakistan. He was kidnapped on January 31st of 2020. We believe at the moment that he remains in okay physical health, whatever that means. Mr. Frericks' family is terrified by his ongoing captivity and have advocated tirelessly for his safe return. They were deeply disappointed that the Trump administration failed to use February 29, 2020 deal with the Taliban to secure Mr. Frericks' release. And the recent announcement that we will be withdrawing all troops from Afghanistan has heightened their fear, as they understandably questioned whether we will have any leverage to secure Mr. Frericks' return once we no longer have a military presence in Afghanistan. And I have repeatedly raised Mr. Frericks' case with members of this administration, in letters with my colleague, Senator Durbin, in briefings with cabinet officials, in a call with the lead negotiator with the Taliban, and with President Biden himself. Everyone has assured me that they are aware of Mr. Frericks and are raising his status in ongoing diplomatic negotiations with the Taliban. And I hope that, consistent with precedent, such as the late Ambassador Richard Holbrooke using the Dayton Accord negotiations as leverage to secure the release of a kidnapped American, I hope that the Biden administration will prioritize every avenue available to achieve the release of Mr. Frericks. Gentlemen, we cannot fail at this mission, and we certainly cannot abandon an American citizen behind in Afghanistan. We must pursue every path available to make sure that Mark Frericks is safely returned to his family in Illinois. And now OSD has as a long-standing relationship with Pakistan. And in fact, Secretary Austin just spoke with Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff a few weeks ago on April 28th. And Haqqani Network operates on the Afghanistan-Pakistani border, and there's a good chance that Mr. Frerichs is actually in Pakistan right now. We should be leveraging our relationships with Pakistan to help secure Mr. Frerichs' return. And I discussed this issue with the Pakistani ambassador a few weeks ago, and he agreed to take the message back to Islamabad. The DoD presently has an opportunity to use senior leader engagements and other interactions with the Pakistani military to raise Mark's case and seek Pakistan's assistance in securing his return. Mr. Helvey, I know this was a long preamble, but it was very important, certainly important to Mr. Frerichs and his family. Mr. Helvey, as the Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, you are the principal advisor to top DoD leadership on issues related to Pakistan. Will you commit to pursuing opportunities to advocate for Mr. Frerichs and seek his return through our cooperation with Pakistan's military?
Senator, absolutely.
Thank you. Withdrawing our troops from Afghanistan without securing the safe return of my constituents, Mr. Frerichs, would be an abject failure of the United States government to rescue an American citizen, a Navy veteran, somebody who was there because the DoD decided to use more contractors, and an Illinoisan who served his country, as I said, in uniform. Now is the time to redouble our efforts to make sure that we secure Mr. Frerichs' safe release and bring him home. Thank you so much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Let me recognize now Senator Cramer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to both of you for being here. One question that came up based on some of the things I heard. Have we committed to completely supporting the current government in Afghanistan should it fall into an all-out civil war? And if so, what would that commitment include?
Senator, thank you for that question. We have committed to continue supporting the Afghan government. We have a bilateral security agreement with the Afghan government in which we indicate we will continue to seek funding to provide support to them, to support the ANDSF, through the mechanisms that we've specified in terms of training, advising, and assisting, salaries, contracted logistics and assistance. So we have committed to supporting our Afghan partners. And through this negotiation period, through the implementation of the U.S. Taliban agreement, we have continued supporting our Afghan partners as they've been fighting the Taliban.
Obviously, a cost-benefit analysis would include, or a risk analysis would include the cost of preventing an all-out civil war versus entering, having to come back and try to clean it up. And I could associate myself with every comment that's been made by my colleagues, even the ones that conflict. That's how conflicting this is, I think, for a lot of us, as it is, no doubt, for you all. I think it was might have been in response to a question from the chairman, but I'm going to maybe get more specific. Or I think you mentioned something about ISR capabilities and whatnot. What type of unmanned or space-borne capabilities do we need to maintain or even enhance to minimize the possibility of global terror threats? Do you have a sense of that?
Well, with respect to Afghanistan, I think the best way to characterize how we need to look at it is based on three concentric circles. There's the type of footprint or apparatus that we would do within Afghanistan. It's based largely on our relationships with local partners, ANDSF and the Afghan government, to be able to understand what's going on within Afghanistan. Then there's a regional component to it, which is outside, which, the things that we can't have in Afghanistan, we'd want to be able to maintain, to be able to provide the type of access basing and overflight that would allow us to have the type of presence. Then there's kind of like this broader global framework where it includes not only national technical means, but also the types of capabilities that may not be resident within the region, but that we could flow into the region on an as-needed basis. And I would also note that over the past 20 years, we've had a lot of different changes in how we as a government and indeed as a society have been combating international terrorist organizations. You can't get on a commercial aircraft or open a new bank account without understanding how we have changed in ways that help us to better understand and illuminate the types of terrorist threats that would seek to do us and our allies harm. So I think all of these things have to be working in concert in order to be able to maintain the type of broader threat picture, if you will, of the types of terrorist threats that we may need to face.
General, maybe you could answer the same question in more specificity as it relates to Afghan or the region regarding assets, whether they be unmanned or space. Is there more we can be doing to shore up this new way of providing some security?
Well, Senator, I think certainly the capability that we currently have and use to achieve our objectives, we want to continue to utilize and make the technological advances that we're able to better enable us. But in terms of specificity, I can't offer you that right now.
Very good. Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cramer. Now, via WebEx, let me recognize Senator Manchin.
I want to thank everybody for their service. I want to congratulate Brigadier General Trollinger for his hopefully his advancement. Very proud of that. First, let me say that I completely support the Afghanistan withdrawal, and we have to shift our focus to other priority threats. The future of Afghanistan and any global impacts rest on whether government can prevail by securing their country and upholding their 2004 Constitution. Between 2009 and 2020, we increased and decreased troop strength at least 5 times. These shifts in end strength ranged from a few hundred to as much as 23,000 personnel. Additionally, we experienced major diplomatic and operational delays in 2012 with insider attacks, and in 2013 with President Karzai temporarily suspended security talks with the U.S. More recently, the Taliban continues to refuse to negotiate efforts until all foreign forces are out of Afghanistan. So one question I would have to General Trollinger: how will our withdrawal from Afghanistan impact other combatant commands?
Senator, if I understand your question correctly, it's as we withdraw from Afghanistan, how will that impact other combatant commands? And the only thing I can offer is that it is not in any way adversely impacting others.
Thank you. Mr. Helvey, one of my fears about our withdrawal from Afghanistan is that it will become a power vacuum in which terrorist organizations can recruit, train, and operate from. With nearly no assets on the ground, we are going to have to rely on regional partners to work with us to stay ahead and on top of counterterrorism efforts. Are you confident in our regional partners and their capacity and commitment to driving terrorism out of the region?
Thank you, Senator. We will have to work with our local and regional partners, and we want to continue developing those capabilities and those partnerships to be able to ensure that we've got the right type of confidence and the right type of framework to address our CT threats. That's one of the things that we as a department, in concert with our interagency colleagues, are doing today, is to make sure that we've got the right type of arrangements, relationships, and framework so that we can ensure that Afghanistan never again becomes a safe haven for terrorism.
Could you outline your assessment of Pakistan and specifically the Pakistani Intelligence Service, the ISI, and the role you expect them to play in our future?
Pakistan has played an important role in Afghanistan, and they have supported the Afghan peace process. Pakistan, as you know, also has allowed us to have overflight and access to be able to support our military presence in Afghanistan. We will continue our conversations with Pakistan because their support and their contribution to the future of Afghanistan, the future peace in Afghanistan, is going to be critical.
Thank you. General Trollinger, the amount of assets that we have accumulated in Afghanistan has to be significant. Specifically, we have provided the Afghan forces with Black Hawk helicopters, A-29 Super Tucano planes, armored vehicles, mine rollers, command and control capacity, and large generators. What assets are you planning to leave behind for the Afghan forces? what assets will be withdrawn and what assets will be destroyed?
Well, Senator, as we conduct the retrograde, we will be transferring facilities, some vehicles, and other equipment that the Afghan National Defense Forces can utilize in their ongoing efforts to secure the country. We will be retrograding that equipment that we're able to bring back to bases and stations in the continental United States as well as elsewhere. And then we'll be disposing of equipment that essentially is either obsolete, is inoperable, or legally we're not able to transfer to Afghanistan.
What I would say is for the assets that you're going to leave with the Afghan people, what guarantees do the American people have the Taliban won't get their hands on it and use it against them?
Well, Senator, I don't think there are any guarantees. Again, I would acknowledge the range of possible outcomes over the coming months, from the dire certainly to the positive. So I couldn't offer any guarantees on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Manchin. Now let me recognize Senator Blackburn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Helvey, yes or no? Do you expect the Taliban will take over Afghanistan when we leave?
Sorry, Senator.
Yes or no?
I do not expect the Taliban to take over Afghanistan after we leave.
So then why does the IC's annual threat assessment say the Taliban is likely to make gains on the battlefield and the Afghan government will struggle to hold the Taliban at bay if the coalition withdraws support?
Senator, I don't believe there is any inconsistency.
I would say there's an inconsistency. Oh, yes or no now? Have we seen a steady stream in violence out of the Taliban over the last year?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, it has risen 169%. They're getting really aggressive. Yes or no? Have the Taliban previously demonstrated a propensity for human rights abuses, cultural genocide, ethnic cleansing efforts?
Historically, yes.
Yes, they have, and we have thousands of undocumented cases, and we know that the U.S. still needs a presence in Afghanistan to resist Iran's malign interest and their plots. And if we fail to recognize the opportunity Afghanistan presents to what the NDS cites as rogue regimes and revision powers, we're kidding ourselves. General Trollinger, yes or no for you? Do you agree with the IC's annual threat assessment that, and I'm quoting, Iran will hedge its bets in Afghanistan, threaten instability, is worried about a long-term U.S. presence in Afghanistan, and as a result, is building ties with both the government in Kabul and the Taliban so it can take advantage of any political outcome? Yes or no? You agree?
I would agree.
Okay, thank you. And to you again, General Trollinger, yes or no? Has Iran provided support to the Taliban at this point in time?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge, okay. As a Middle East subject matter expert on the Joint Staff, do you assess that Iran is intent on taking advantage of a U.S. withdrawal in Afghanistan, and what does that look like?
I would assess that they would be opportunists and looking for every opportunity to gain an advantage, a decisive advantage, a slight advantage. Any opportunity they might perceive that they have, they would look to take advantage of that.
Do you believe that Iran is prepared both politically and militarily to compete on two fronts?
I can't answer that question.
Okay. Could you answer that in closed session?
I could talk to you more about that in closed session.
Excellent, thank you. Within 48 hours of the announced Afghanistan withdrawal, the Washington Post wrote, and I'm quoting, Beijing should use its leverage with Pakistan to keep the Taliban true to the February 2020 agreement and encouraging a ceasefire among fighting parties in Afghanistan. China has some incentive to do this, lest Afghanistan become a source of instability, particularly within Xinjiang. So Secretary Helvey, do you assess China, Iran, or both will inject themselves into the affairs of a post-U.S. occupied Afghanistan, and what form do you see that taking?
Senator, I do agree that I think China will become more involved. They are involved in Afghanistan.
Do you think Beijing looks at Afghanistan as an investment opportunity?
Yes, Senator, they're looking at it primarily for economic purposes, but also they do have concerns about counterterrorism and extremist threats.
Rare earth minerals?
That would fall within an economic opportunity, yes,
Okay,
Senator.
thank you. Knowing what you know about China's Belt and Road Initiative, specifically their overland routes, are they predicated on access to Central Asia?
A significant part of One Belt, One Road does transit through Central Asia and Pakistan.
From an exclusively geographic standpoint, if China had unfettered access to Afghanistan, knowing that they share that border, would there be anything standing between them and their land-based BRI route to Tehran?
I would have to look into that a little bit more in detail. I'm aware of the investments through Central Asia and Pakistan. There's also maritime routes to Iran as well. But that I would submit that's not the objective of
Right. I would
China's
appreciate
Belt and Road.
getting that in writing because I think it would give them that unfettered access, the ability to build that consistent route. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. And now let me recognize Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my first question, Mr. Halsey, is the Trump administration entered into an agreement in February of 2020 that all U.S. troops would be out of Afghanistan by May 1st of 2021. The Taliban had indicated that if that did not occur, they would begin attacking U.S. troops, which they had not done during the period leading up to that. My specific question is, have there been attacks on U.S. troops subsequent to May 1, or has the Taliban tacitly accepted the fact that the timetable has been extended to September?
Senator, there have been no Taliban attacks against U.S. or coalition forces since May 1. I can't speak to what the Taliban's thinking is or if there's been a tacit internal acceptance of that, but there have been no attacks against U.S. or coalition forces.
But the Taliban has gained ground in the last several months, have they not?
Senator, yes, the Taliban has gained some ground in Afghanistan, and they've continued, positioning themselves, within Afghanistan, over the past several months.
A question for both of you. This is the definition of a difficult decision. Were we to decide it's a vital national interest to preserve the existing civil government, to protect women's rights, and otherwise stifle the power of the Taliban in the country, what would it take in terms of a commitment by this country in terms of troops, money, air power? Are we back to 100,000 troops and a surge such as occurred some years ago? General, your thoughts? What would it take?
Senator, I can't answer that question specifically. I won't presuppose a decision or a possible outcome, and can't speak to what it might take in that.
But if the president said to you, I want to stabilize, I want to get Afghanistan back to where it was 5 years ago, your military advice would be, we need a lot more troops, Mr. President, and ISR, air power, and a greater investment. Isn't that true? I mean, you're not going to do it with 2,500, 4,000 troops. Isn't that correct?
I would I would guess that if that guidance and direction was given and the objectives were changed, then yes, we would look to have significantly more capability.
For an indefinite period, that's what's very difficult about this. We've been there 20 years, and here we are with somewhat the same situation that we were in when we entered the country. So not only is it a question of investment, but it's a question of persistent investment over, as I say, an indefinite period. Would you agree? You probably don't want to, but I'm asking you.
Well, again, I think if, I don't want to presuppose certainly an outcome or direction that we're given in terms of maybe our objective changing and what it is we need to do based on a potential outcome.
Mr. Halsey, we've invested a huge amount in Afghanistan in terms of dollars, lives, tens of thousands of people wounded, and yet here we are on the brink of, it's debatable, we'll know in a year or so, a Taliban retaking the country, and we're right back where we were in 2001. My question is, why couldn't the Afghan government succeed given the level of support that they've had? Why? They've had air power, they've had ISR, they've had economic support, they've had infrastructure support, and yet we see this terrorist group taking over in rural areas and approaching Kabul. What is this something in the nature of the Afghan polity that a central government is not going to succeed, or was it the people in this government? Why are we where we are given the level of investment we've made?
Senator, that's a complicated question. I mean, in part, I think you've hit on a number of points. I think, the central government in Afghanistan has not been strong. It's been, over the course of Afghan's history, it has not been pronounced by strong central government. In fact, it's largely been weak and diffuse and distributed. What we have seen and what we've tried to promote is a greater, central government kind of bringing all Afghans to the table and being part of a governing system that can ensure security for the country and economic development. That has been difficult, and that is not yet complete. I think in terms of why we were there, Senator, I think it's important that we were there. We were there because of the attacks against this country.
It was a counterterrorism mission.
It was a counterterrorism mission. That's why we were authorized forces to go there.
And it succeeded for 20 years.
It has largely succeeded. We brought the perpetrators of the 9/11 attacks, to justice, and we have significantly reduced the threat of international terrorists emanating from Afghanistan. I think the president's decision reflects his determination that American interests can best be served by completing and ending the U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan. That doesn't mean that the U.S. involvement in Afghanistan concludes. We will continue to work with the Afghan government. We'll continue to maintain a diplomatic presence, and we'll continue providing support to our Afghan partners, because we do have interests still in Afghanistan. But the president's determination is our interests can best be served without a military presence in that country.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.